32 teams in 32 days. This is episode 32, the finale episode, the Houston Texans episode. Let's welcome in John Hickman, host of Locked On Texans. John, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, Jake? Happy to be with you on your show today. Thank you for the invite. Not necessarily excited to talk about the Houston Texans with the craziness that we have going on, but excited to be on the show with you today. So let's get started.
It's glad to have you. And for the Texans, it seems like it was 5 years ago that they were 30 minutes away from going to the AFC Championship game. Then everything goes downhill. They lose a bunch of draft picks, left with nothing, a couple of trades, and trade DeAndre Hopkins, J.J. Watt's out the door. And now this whole thing with Deshaun Watson. It's been a whirlwind, to say the least, over the last 600 days. But I guess we can start with Watson. He's been in the news a bit, to say the least. Not sure what to expect, whether he plays or not in 2021. A lot of it is still developing. But what are the feelings right now in Texans fandom about Deshaun Watson?
Right now, I think everybody is just being patient with the process, understanding that whether or not he is cleared from these allegations, life after Deshaun Watson is, inevitable at some point, rather. And so I think that's what everybody is right now, really working to see who is going to be our contingency plan at quarterback. How will Houston move on from Watson when the time comes? Because when we look at what's going on with the legalities of everything with his case, we are still at a standstill. Within a month and some change, we haven't really gotten to a point where we can say clearly, without a shadow of a doubt, with facts proven that he did it. So with the time frame going by how it has, I don't think we will see anything to necessarily have enough to convict Deshaun Watson. And I'm not taking the side of Watson at all. I'm just speaking about where we are right now. We have not received facts. So eventually, unless the NFL steps in, which honestly they should have a long time ago and put him on the players exempt list, unless that happens, I don't see Deshaun Watson playing for the Houston Texans this year at all. And some of the things that I've been hearing around the camp is there is still a deal on the table for Deshaun Watson in Miami. It won't affect this year's draft. Of course, that's in a couple of days, so that's not going to happen. But there's still an opportunity for him to go to Miami. And if that happens, then, of course, we would expect to get Tua Tagovailoa, and they'll be able to move forward with the process. But life after Deshaun Watson is going to happen at some point soon, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was just about to ask you about, life without Deshaun Watson. It's crazy. 3 months ago, we were talking about potential trade packages that Houston was going to get for him, whether it was from Miami, Carolina. Obviously, Carolina already made their move at quarterback in response to, okay, Deshaun Watson's probably not going to happen in 2021, and we need to find a quarterback. And all this is crazy considering he's the reigning passing champion.
Yeah, I think Houston definitely botched this trade. And I'll say this. Within the last 2 years, Houston has botched several trades. Look at DeAndre Hopkins going to Arizona for a banged-up and washed David Johnson and the second-round pick. That pick was used on Ross Blacklock, who had a very underwhelming rookie year. Before that, the trade to send Jadeveon Clowney to Seattle for a third-round pick and Jacob Martin. Now, Houston did win that trade, but at that time, they were expecting to get more out of that trade, and it just didn't happen, which, ultimately is a part of why Houston has the lack of draft capital they have right now. So with Deshaun Watson, no NFL organization, no team, when things like this happen, the team knows about it months before. And if the team knew about it, they were very adamant at the time of keeping him on their roster, but they should have gotten what they could have the most, because this year's quarterback draft is one of those generational talent years for quarterbacks. And Houston would have had an easier job with replacing who they have on their roster at the quarterback position right now. So moving forward, whenever it does take place, we have to be prepared for the following years and a player, unless it's Miami. Like if you get Tua Tagovailoa in the trade, which if he goes to Miami, that's going to happen. along with those picks, then Houston takes his red shirt year, see what you have out of the guys on the roster, some of your younger players, your rookies, and your veterans. Houston signed a lot of one-year deals, but then you can move on from it because you would have the draft capital and more cap space to build a real franchise. Under Nick Caserio and David Culley, the two newcomers here in town.
Yeah, so the Texans signed the most free agents out of any team this offseason. You mentioned it a little bit. I believe it was 30 or 31 players that they brought in from outside. A team that's covered in turmoil. They have former players calling for ownership's head, current players wanting to leave. Now, they didn't turn this roster into a contender, but we're still talking about a team that, that's probably heading toward a top 3 pick with or without Deshaun Watson in 2021. What did you make of this complete roster turnover, and how were they able to do it with limited salary cap?
Nick Caserio did an amazing job of reconstructing deals. You look at Brandon Cooks agreeing to reconstruct his deal, Whitney Merciless, Laramie Tunsil did a very good job of reconstructing his deal for this year. So overall, he will still get his 22 per year. But the way that it was reconstructed this year, it was turned into a signing bonus, and his salary was changed. So Nick Caserio came in day one with a plan, and I like it because what that showed me was you're not going to leave traces of bad deals, bad contracts, and bad players from the Bill O'Brien era. Bill O'Brien signed a lot of guys to bad contracts last year. He influenced within the last 2 years, even when you go back when he wasn't the GM and it was Brian Gain in place, he had a lot of influence in a lot of these bad contracts. And so Nick Caserio coming in, getting this team under the salary cap, getting this team to $23 million over the cap at one point, doing a very good job with these deals, bringing in quality players. And again, as I mentioned, bringing a lot of these guys in on 1 to 2 year deals that if we don't like what we see this current year, we can move on. And I think that's why a lot of people here in Houston like what Nick Caserio has done. Now, out of those 32 players that were brought in, a lot of those men are what they call competition guys. They're going to create competition. So the ceiling for Houston this year isn't high. We won 4 games with Deshaun Watson at quarterback last year. Without Deshaun Watson at quarterback, you're looking at 2, maybe 3, depending on, how good the ground game is going to be, which is what Houston is expecting to really be their bread and butter for this offense, revamping their offensive line, bringing in Philip Lindsay. Those are 2 key things. But in the passing league, unless you're Baltimore Ravens and you have a league MVP like Lamar Jackson, running the ball isn't going to necessarily get you wins. And so I'm looking at a 3, maybe a repeat of 4 wins from last year. But with that being said, Caserio is the guy. Now we have to see if David Culley is the right guy for the job.
Right, and let's talk about that. I mean, did anyone? I don't think anyone wanted to take this job. Kind of talk to me about David Culley, him, and the faith, if any, that you have in him.
Speechless at this. That's a good question. I don't necessarily have, faith in David Culley at this time because, and I'll ask you, what do we actually know about David Culley? Never been a coordinator, always been an assistant coach at some level. As a wide receiver coach, underperformed in Baltimore and in Kansas City. His time in Kansas City as a wide receiver coach, there was 1 year no wide receiver caught a touchdown.
Right.
And so
it was the year that they started 9-0. They started the year 9-0 and didn't have a single wide receiver catch a touchdown.
So that speaks highly to your job description. Even with Baltimore, during his time there as a passing game coordinator, just the task that he took on, it just seems like those receivers underperformed. Or wherever he was across that team, outside of the run game coordinator, I think that was a position he held. It just underperformed. And so do I think he's a guy that could be a good X's and O's? Maybe. But I haven't seen him as a coordinator. And yes, a lot of people have the feelings of he is brought in to just be what Caserio and the McNair family wants until they're able to move on. So we have to see. we have to wait and see. I will say this. He is the head coach, but the coordinators and the assistant coaches on this team is something that's very, very exciting to see. I like Pep Hamilton. I like James Campen. I like Andy Bischoff as a tight end coach. I like Lovie Smith replacing Romeo Cornell, even though Lovie Smith in the last few years, if his coaching didn't do as well, I think he'll be in a position to really help this team by simplifying things upon the defense. So his coaching staff is what I'm more excited about personally. And if the coaching staff gets players to really ball out, commit, create turnovers on defense, and we can score some type of points, then he's going to look good, and that's good.
Yeah, and Pep Hamilton is the kind of the marquee name that you mentioned there on Culley's staff. It was surprising that the new regime in LA didn't want to keep him. He did great with Justin Herbert, and there are people who have come out of the public over the last couple of months and said Pep Hamilton is probably that guy who helped Justin Herbert the most, and he did a unbelievable, phenomenal job with Justin Herbert in his rookie year. Texans got him, which was really surprising to see. Why would he want to go to Houston when the question mark around the quarterback position is up in the air? But he's their new passing game coordinator. Kind of talk about him a little bit.
Yeah, I just think he does a great job with younger quarterbacks. Not only younger quarterbacks, but I think he's done a great job with quarterbacks that are going to be used to be transition quarterbacks. And him and Tyrod Taylor worked together in LA for the Chargers. They've said that they have a good relationship with one another. And I like that because whether or not we get a younger quarterback via trade at some point in the offseason or we draft one, like a Kellen Mond name has been thrown around for Houston. I like Kyle Trask. Whether or not they draft one or bring one in, you have a guy that has coached greatness. And what we saw out of Justin Herbert last year was greatness. Now, will he be able to sustain it throughout his career? I'm not sure. We've seen guys have amazing rookie years and tail off. But we know that he was a product of working with Pep Hamilton. And so I think that's the most important aspect. No matter who's going to be taking snaps under center, that guy right there, Pep Hamilton, is going to help that player reach a new potential, a new goal. And I like that. Everybody should.
So Tyrod Taylor comes in, like you said, this looks like a backup, but it's some serious insurance for Deshaun Watson. Worst case scenario, he starts in 2021, is a bridge to whoever the Texans do draft in 2022, because the draft pick hell is over. The Texans do have all of their picks next year in 2022. We expect them to be picking pretty early based on what their roster looks like. The division got better. 2 of their 4 wins came against Jacksonville last year, who now has Trevor Lawrence. So it's going to be a tough road for Houston.
Who now has Trevor Lawrence, and the draft is on Thursday.
Well, most likely it's Trevor Lawrence. I mean, it's
I think that's so funny. We already know that's where he's heading, right?
Yeah. So worst case scenario, if the whole thing with Watson doesn't play out, if he doesn't end up playing, Tyrod Taylor comes in, familiar face with Pep Hamilton, like you said. What did you make of this move bringing him in? Because it was pretty early in free agency when they made that move. It seemed as if Houston knows, okay, we need to do something at this position because otherwise we're going to be screwed.
Yeah, no, that's my thoughts exactly. They signed Tyrod Taylor around maybe 4:00 Central Time.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure
the news,
yeah,
right? And the news of Deshaun Watson dropped like around 10:00 later that day. So my thinking is maybe they knew the bombshell was coming, or what we've heard here in Houston, that they actually did have the deal for the Dolphins on the table, and they were gearing themselves up to move on from Deshaun. However, the legal situation started. So Tyrod is who Tyrod is. He's a guy that led the Bills to the playoffs for the first time in over 20 years. He is a good backup quarterback in this league. He can win you a game here, a game there. But ultimately, you bring in Tyrod because you believe that you have someone else that you believe in. And I think Houston was just either a little too late before trading Deshaun Watson, or B, knew that the news was about to drop and needed the best available quarterback on the market in order to sustain some type of season. And Tyrod just so happened to be there. I'm still holding out that they will get a younger quarterback, allow that quarterback a season to sit unless it's a ready now quarterback. Allow that young quarterback to sit and learn the NFL. Tyrod can do what he needs to do on a one-year deal. By next year, whoever it is should be ready. Hopefully be ready.
So J.J. Watt leaves. They release him. There probably was no trade market for him because everyone knew he was going to end up on the free agent market anyways. How weird is it to see J.J. Watt go somewhere else?
You know what, man? It's not weird at all. I'm not one of those guys, man. Like if players have done everything that they can for a franchise and it's just not working out, and you feel like there's a better team for you where you can actually win a ring, go for it. Like JJ has given literally everything to this franchise. Hurricane Harvey, three-time defensive player of the year. Like whatever you want to say about JJ negative, you can't use it because he's literally done everything. I thought it was weird that he went to Arizona and then said that he wanted to go be on a championship contending team. I thought Arizona and championship contending team didn't go together. But that was his, that's where he wanted to go. That's where he felt like he had the best opportunity to make some money and win a ring. 2-year deal. I'm happy for him. Hopefully they get something done. Him, DeAndre Hopkins. At one point, Jordan Thomas was on that roster at tight end. I think they released him, but if he feels like he can win there, go win. And we'll still love you down here because we know ultimately it was the franchise fault you didn't get far. So we're not going to blame you.
So they swap Nick Martin for Justin Britt at the center position. They swap Kenny Stills, bring in Dante Moncrief, bring in Vernon Hargreaves as well. I guess those were the kind of three premier moves. They added Mark Ingram, all four of those guys, new starters, trying to rebuild the roster. What were some of the moves, maybe a couple that I named, maybe some that I didn't. What were a couple moves that stood out to you during this whole reshaping of the roster process over the last couple of months?
Hands down on the defensive side, trading for Shaq Lawson and putting him back as a traditional defensive end, and then also pairing him with Malik Collins, who had a down year in Oakland, but before that in Dallas, gave Dallas 3 good years. So on the defensive side, I like the pairing of Malik Collins, Shaq Lawson. But on the offensive side, I like Phillip Lindsay. I do. He's still a young back. Phillip Lindsay has been in the league 3 years now. Still a young back. And Houston did a very good job of revamping their offensive line by doing 2 things. Getting rid of Nick Martin, getting rid of Zach Fulton, but more importantly, above all, getting rid of Mike Devlin, the offensive line coach, the worst offensive line coach in the entire NFL. So they revamped that offensive line and brought in a younger back and then brought in Mark Ingram. Still have David Johnson, but O-line and Phillip Lindsay, those were my 2 favorite offseason, at least so far, offseason updates.
So let's kind of move into the draft. The Texans don't have a first or second round pick for this. Well, they don't have a first for the second consecutive year. Last year they picked in the second round, took Ross Blacklock, who I loved. Didn't look like himself rookie year. Hopefully he'll take a sophomore slump because I was really high on him coming out of TCU. The Texans pick at 67, 109, 147, and 158. They have plenty of picks coming late on day 4, so they can kind of get some more depth guys, special teamers, maybe get a diamond in the rough later on. They're obviously limited in premium picks. What type of positions could they target with the picks they do have, starting at pick 67 on day 2?
We've talked about this a lot. I think the biggest question mark for Houston right now is actually the quarterback position. And unless they feel comfortable with a move after the draft that they will acquire, a younger quarterback that they believe in. If there is a quarterback available at 67, I'm big on Kyle Trask. I've been called all types of crazy. Then you go with quarterback. However, I think another need for Houston across this team is the secondary position. Need another cornerback. Vernon Hargreaves III he's not a cornerback in this league from what we've seen that should play majority of the downs. That's just what it is. Or the wide receiver position. Brandon Cooks is good, but Dante Moncrief, Andre Roberts, Chris Conley, none of those guys are solidified threats in this league at their position. And I like Chris Conley. I think if Chris Conley was paired with Deshaun Watson, I would really include him because he'd play with a more competent quarterback, but he's coming to the same situation that he did in Jacksonville. Who's going to be my quarterback this Sunday? Who's going to be my quarterback this Sunday? Is this quarterback going to be good enough to give me the ball on a consistent basis? And I think that's what his issue is going to be here in Houston. So the cornerback position and the wide receiver position are the two the two positions across his team that I think can use an upgrade. But if there's a quarterback at 67 that you really believe in as a team organization, you take him.
Yeah,
live with the results later.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. In my mock that's coming out, my final mock that's coming out tomorrow, I believe, I did have Kellen Mond mocked them at 67, and it took me some convincing myself to do it because I feel like, okay, they only have one pick on the first 2 days. Taking a quarterback when they have Deshaun Watson on the roster right now, when they have Tyrod Taylor, not sure how much sense that makes, but when you really trickle down, to it and think about it, Watson's out the door. Tyrod Taylor, we don't know if, he had that shoulder thing last year, wasn't completely healthy, lost his starting job to Justin Herbert in week 2, and then didn't play again. Like, we don't the Texans are going to need a quarterback, and we'll see what they do next year in the draft, but they can't really focus on that. I think quarterback at 67 might be the play if the guy that they like is there.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's just whatever Nick Caserio, and he will have full free range to do what he wants in this draft. Whatever he feels is best for this organization moving forward at 67, because I believe with the offseason signings, these free agents that were brought in, he still has a target on his back to see whether or not he's going to do what he has to do in the draft with the limited picks that they have. Not good draft picks at all to start your first year off, but I think he will do a good job in drafting players that make sense for Houston.
So I'm not sure how much draft work you've done, but starting at pick 67, do you have any, a certain list of players that if they don't go quarterback, you could potentially see them targeting, or just guys in general that catch your eye?
No, not necessarily. We've done our draft series, but to go round by round, pick by pick, no. I will say if he's available in the 4th round, and it seems like he's been getting a lot of buzz lately, it seems like his draft stock has been rising. But if Bobby Brown III out of Texas A&M is available in the 4th round, or if they feel highly about him in the 3rd, I don't think they do. But if he's available, he's somebody who's nasty, big, can control the line of scrimmage. I love them at Texas A&M, and I hate the Aggies. I really do. Texas is a UT state, and I want all of these Aggie fans to just cool their high horse. But I like Bobby Brown III. Out of everybody in this draft, I like him the most. And I would love to see him in a Houston jersey.
So it sounds like you're a Texas Longhorn fan.
I am. And unfortunately, we've had some bad years.
Right. So not sure how you feel about Coach Herman. He's out the door. Bringing in Sark. What are we feeling about that?
You know what Sark is? Sark is a recruitment tool. And I like that. I do. We've missed out on recruits simply because we're not Alabama. We're not one of these, SEC dominant schools. And I think Sark, with his connections, I think he'd do a great job of bringing in players. And he already has. My worry with Sark has been everybody's worry with Sark. Is just how long can he sustain? He's had his moments, whether it's in the NFL or college, but I don't hold a man to his past transgressions. I want to see what he can do tomorrow, and so that's where we are right now. I'm glad Todd Orlando and Tom Herman's are out the door. I could not stand Todd Orlando. Why would you call a safety blitz, all-out blitz on 3rd and 23 against LSU when you are winning the game? That doesn't make sense.
Oh,
But
we're going to that game a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That was the Joe Burrow game.
Yeah. That game, this is going to your YouTube page, so I'm going to keep it as clean as possible. I was purely disgusted at that call because we had LSU on the ropes. We're going back and forth. All we needed was a stop, and you call a all-out blitz on 3rd and 23 when your corners, your secondary, the entire defense have been getting roasted the entire game. Jamar Chase had an amazing game that game too.
He did.
Like that started off his campaign.
Yep. His Biletnikoff game. Now he's gonna what seems like coming to my Bengals. I'm a Bengals fan, and seems like he's coming to Cincinnati, which I think he'll be good. I think they should take Penei Sewell, but I think Jamar Chase will be good. But anyways, John, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thank you very much. You guys can follow me on Twitter at SomeSportsGuy, and follow us at Locked On Texans at Locked On Texans. Again, that's Locked On Texans on Twitter and at SomeSportsGuy. Jake, I appreciate the invite, man. It was fun.
No problem, man. It was fun. And I've had a couple Locked On guys on this show. This is the finale, the last episode. 32 teams in 32 days. It's been a blast. Thank you, everybody, for following along on the TWSN YouTube channel. I'm Jake Sirkus, joined alongside John Hickman, Locked On Texans. And we're not going to catch you guys in the next one because that was it. So thank you guys once again for listening to every single episode, watching every single episode. It's been a blast. And I'm Jake Sirkus signing off.